Hello folks, welcome to Cairns Writes. I thought I would try and do some vlogs that weren't just about my books, because that's quite boring after a while. So I spoke to Wifey and asked her for inspiration on the kind of things that might be interesting, and she came up with a long list of things, some of which I don't think are interesting, but some of which are quite interesting. So today I thought I would try and choose my favourite character. Anyone who loves reading, obviously, 9 times out of 10 I think is drawn in by the character, and there have been some wonderful, wonderful characters that have stayed with me for a very long time after reading a book. I think there are characters that I've learned much of what I know in my life from, and that have changed me as a person, and have inspired me in many, many ways. Choosing a favourite character is impossible. It's almost as hard as asking someone what their favourite book is. But a few sort of jump straight into my mind. In terms of fantasy and science fiction, I thought for kind of pure coolness and badassery, I might have gone for Quick Ben from the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or maybe Waylander from the David Gemmell books, because they were both amazing. I thought for generally a really original, interesting, brilliant character, Inquisitor Glockta from the Joe Abercrombie, the first Joe Abercrombie trilogy, is very tempting because he's amazing. Tyrion from a book called A Game of Thrones. I do feel obliged to point out that it was some books before it was a TV show. He's just a great character in so many ways. So very, very tempting. Going back in time a bit, I think for pure kind of fantasy goodness, I might have gone for Tanis Half-Elven from the Dragonlance series, because growing up he was a real favourite of mine. But when it came down to it, Terry Pratchett was not the character, but was the author who has created characters that particularly have worked for me. And it had to be Death. Rincewind was a very close favourite. I love Rincewind for many, many reasons. As much as anything because he's the least likely hero ever, which is always a pleasure. But Death is genius. I think Death is a masterclass in how to take an idea, first of all, that people already have so many preconceptions about, and turn it on its head and do something wonderful and original and clever with it. In the Discworld novels, he has very little screen time, really, when you think about it. This is, particularly in the books that aren't the one about him or the ones about him. There's very little that he does, very little dialogue, and yet he just stays with you. He has emotional weight and impact. He is funny. He has a real strong sense of character, and yet Pratchett does very, very little with him, which is just brilliant. Um, and I love him. I just love him. He's great, and I think the fact that you can take a character like Death, who does turn up in the Discworld for serious reasons, and make him funny and yet still have pathos and weight is genius too. So yeah, so my favourite character I think is Death, from the Discworld series. But if you ask me on another day, it might be different. I'd love to know what your favourite character is. So if you have one, or indeed if you find it far too difficult to choose, please let me know in the comments. Cheers.